Hey everybody, welcome back to TechOdyssey. So today I'm here to talk about one of the best BlackBerries ever made that unfortunately I think came out a little bit too late, and that is the BlackBerry Z30. This is one of my most favorite BlackBerries, and this phone right here, I think had they launched with this instead of the Z10 would have really put them back on the map. It's well made. It has 4 microphones in it for pickup for when you're talking on the phone. It really sounded good when you were making phone calls. It has stereo speakers, top and on the bottom. Headphone jack, 16 gigabytes of storage, expandable to 64. It has a 5-inch screen. Back in 2013 when this phone came out, that was big. I mean, no pun intended. It was big. That's back when they first started calling phones phablets. People got all over the Note and they were like, man, the Note, it's too big. This whole phone tablet thing is crazy. And now we're pushing the 7-inch screen envelope. But at the point in time this was made, this really came out of left field. Like, I don't think anyone in the market expected BlackBerry to be one of the first ones to push having a 5-inch screen in the market. I mean, it was traditionally known for having a physical keyboard. They kind of changed that with the whole Z10, which they launched with, but this one, so much better. It's like when they made the Z30, they took all of the things that people didn't like about the Z10 and they fixed it all. And then they gave us the Z30, and like I said, had they let off with this one, I think it would have been a much, much different story. Now, however, of course, the phones weren't really what killed BlackBerry. It was the operating system and the lack of application support. But BlackBerry did such a good job with this phone. Everything about it, from the front to the back, modeled and constructed so well, has a great balanced feel to it. Looks premium. It has this nice soft touch back on it, but at the same time, you can see the carbon fiber glass weave design that they did with it. I always liked the way that it looked. I liked the way that it felt. It was really well balanced and it felt great to hold it in the hand. It felt great to use it. It had a 2880 milliamp battery that would get you through the day. I mean, which was a legitimate issue with phones back then. They wouldn't last that long. So having a phone that would do what you needed it to do, and it was running BlackBerry 10.3.2, which was, I mean, it was the best that it got, really. I mean, you had the Android emulation for Android 4, you had the Priority Hub, you had the digital assistant that was in there. So there were so many things that they got right with this phone, and unfortunately, the problems BlackBerry had were not this phone. This was a very well-made phone. Of course, they followed it up with the Passport, which everybody loves. It's enduring. It was also equally as impressive, if not more so, in so many ways. But BlackBerry actually made a phone that could have, and I mean, maybe for a little bit, did compete in the traditional all-slab phone sector. And it had the amazing BlackBerry 10 keyboard with the predictive text for the swiping and all that great stuff. It was just a pleasure to use. And I remember whenever I got mine, I was using T-Mobile at the time, and this was a Verizon exclusive, which really hurt it. It did come out with an unlocked model later, but I actually went to Verizon and I signed up for a phone plan just so I could get this phone and use it. I was really enamored with this device. I could remember it was so nice having Verizon 4G LTE, having the great service that they had, and this phone was so snappy. Even though it wasn't that big of an upgrade, it still only had 2 gigabytes of RAM like the Z10 and the Q10, but it had the 1.7 gigahertz processor over the 1.5, and this thing flew. I mean, it was like, all right, BlackBerry 10 really feels like it's running the way that it was designed to. Like, BlackBerry 10 ran fine on the Z10 and the Q10, but this just took it to the next level. And then it didn't have the boxy screen like the Q10. It had a more elongated, larger screen, bigger than the 4.2-inch screen on the Z10, so it didn't feel cramped. It didn't feel small. The keyboard felt stretched out and at the size that it should be for you to be able to use it and to type on it. It had a great feel. It was just a really remarkable and I think exemplary phone, and it really came out of left field. I don't think people expected something like this to come from them, and it really was a solid phone. And like, the sound experience, again, was phenomenal. As far as specs went, in most categories, the Z30 actually competed really well with what was going on in the Android world. I mean, this came out the same time that the Samsung Galaxy S4 came out, and I liked this one better. I mean, whenever the Samsung Galaxy S3 came out, I had it, and then I quickly ditched it for the Z10 when I got that. But this right here, I showed it off to people. I carried it at work. I used this as my daily driver until the Passport came out, and I always loved it. And it had everything that you needed. Plus it had the micro HDMI on the side, so you could plug that in and get output display to plug into a TV. You had your buttons over here for the volume. You had the power button on top. It was just a solid phone. And of course it had the legendary leather pouch that you could put it in just like your other BlackBerries. This was the pinnacle of BlackBerry smartphone creation. Yes, I know people like the Prib. Yes, I know some people like the D-Tech series, but this was born, bred, raised inside the BlackBerry barn. They brought it out, and it was such a phenomenal device. It still is. I mean, if this right here had updated software or updated internals, or if they made an Android version of this, I would happily use it. It's just a sharp-looking phone. Yes, it has a 5-inch screen on it that was running a 720p resolution, but that wasn't really out of the question back then. That was fairly common in a lot of instances. 1080p, yes, it would have been nice, but of course it would have put more burden on the battery, which is one of the reasons why it got such good battery, because that 2880 milliamp battery combined with 720p, and then it had an AMOLED display, which, I mean, wasn't on the brightest side, but it still looked good. It had nice colors, had great viewing angles. Yes, it very much was a business phone, but of course it did give you access to BlackBerry 10, the BlackBerry World, and then eventually we got the Android emulation and the different apps that were there, but it was really a pleasure to use back in the day. And in the heyday of BlackBerry 10, it was a really solid device, and of course you could see why people liked it. In addition to that, it had the 2-megapixel camera on the front, which was nothing to write home about, and it had the 8-megapixel camera on the back, which was also kind of nothing to write home about. And I talked about this in the video the other day. If you look at the Q10, you look at the Z10, you look at the Z30, they all three have the exact same camera setup. Yes, it had HDR. Yes, it could shoot 1080p video on the back end on 30 frames per second, but it just wasn't that great. And the camera interface wasn't that great. I mean, it was capable of taking pictures. It had the time shift feature, which was really cool. That was one thing that BlackBerry 10 was so revolutionary with. You had the time shift with the photo, so you could get the ideal photo. That's something that Apple and especially the Pixel have copied for their usage. And BlackBerry 10 itself was very revolutionary. And one of the things that people hated on this phone so much for was it was all swipe gesture based. Newsflash, everyone. If you look at Apple and you look at Android now, they're all going swipe gesture based. And so many of the swipe gestures mimic what was on here. Swipe up to get to the home screen, swipe up and over so you can get the peek feature, or so you can look over at the hub. The pop-up notifications that would come up on top. That was new to these guys before it came to iOS and before it came to Android. So there was a lot of things that BlackBerry really did right here. And they even had their own smart assistant with 10.3. So BlackBerry is definitely not at fault when it comes to being creative and being inventive and making quality products. They just missed the mark, which was the important one, that people want access to social media. People want all the apps. And BlackBerry tried. I mean, they paid a lot of money. They put a lot into trying to make sure that there were apps whenever this operating system came on board. There was just only so much money they could throw to these people. And then eventually the developers stopped making apps for them, or they didn't support the apps that they did make. There just wasn't a large enough audience. There was not enough financial incentive in it for them. And then they moved on. And of course, BlackBerry went on and adopted Android as the operating system for them to use. And then the rest is history. But this guy right here deserves a special place on the shelf of fantastic smartphones, especially in the BlackBerry world. A lot of people love a lot of their devices, and that's, I think, a big testament to the quality products that BlackBerry was making. People love the 8800, the 8900, the Pearl, the Passport. The Z30, to me, is the most iconic and best touchscreen, all touchscreen device that they made, and still to this day holds up really well from a hardware perspective. Really, the biggest problem that this phone has is just like all the other BlackBerry 10 phones. The operating system stopped being supported. It's on life support. They're not doing anything with it. And at this point, the hardware is pretty well antiquated. I mean, if they were to actually update the browser on this thing, I would probably still even consider using it, but they haven't updated it. The browser experience is terrible. And if you're not using BlackBerry 10 apps on here, they take forever to load. It's hit or miss whether you can even get them to work anymore. So yeah, it's just one of those things. I mean, of course, if you're using BlackBerry 10, you understand the limitations. If you didn't use BlackBerry, it's something that you can learn about and read about. But unfortunately, I believe that BlackBerry 10 at the time was the best operating system, but sometimes being the best doesn't mean you're always the winner. And as far as this went, I mean, it was super secure, and that's something that I think people appreciate now. at the civilian market more than they did back then, but that's just part of the way things have gone. And unfortunately, BlackBerry 10 is what BlackBerry 10 is now. And I wish at some point in time they could find a way to resurrect it or move on and have their own operating system. I think people would even be more open to that now with having the level of security and just having a good browser. If you just had a good browser and had good security and had a great BlackBerry phone, I think that even in today's market, it would be really appealing, because there is a certain segment of people that really appreciate that, more so than having Instagram, Pinterest, and Facebook. But at the end of the day, this is the Z30. It was a fantastic phone. I totally loved it. I paid a ton of money for it back in the day. I paid a lot of money for service just to use it because, like I said, it was exclusive to Verizon. But glad I was able to get my hands on this. A big thank you to Ed for sending this to me, a follower and supporter of the channel. Super cool guy. Thank you so much. And I plan on making more videos with this in the future. But glad to have this back in my collection. Glad I was able to look at it again, bring this video to you guys, and talk about it some. But if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them down in the comment section. I'll get back with you. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. Hopefully you've enjoyed the trip down memory lane, talking about, the old BlackBerry days of old and the fantastic Z30, because it was one heck of a phone. That's all I've got. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like and the subscribe button and the little notification bell if you want updates when new videos come out. And as always, thanks for being here. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you guys next time.